Welcome all of you to today's tutorial. Now I'm gonna show you how I built and painted this new Vegas sign for your mainly Fallout Wasteland Warfare boards. We're going to print the sign today, so head over to Thingiverse, search for Fallout New Vegas sign, and we need two of these STLs, the body and the legs. Download the two files and import them one by one into your slicer like Cheeto box. The body's way too big, so go in and scale it down like 84 millimeters in size. This way it will be perfect size for 32 or 28 millimeter miniatures like you have in Fallout Wasteland Warfare. On the second file, the legs, you also should make sure that they are the perfect size like I show you here. Then go in, support them, put them on your build plate and hit the print button. After printing, washing and curing and spray painting the white, your sign should look something like this. Now onto the real brushwork. We start with McCraggy blue and paint the letters of Too Fabulous with this blue color. Try to work as precise as you can. The structure helps you because the letters themselves are a bit higher. And also try to make sure that the edges are painted, so when you look at it, you don't see any white on the letters themselves. Next, we go to Corn Red and start painting the big letters Las Vegas. And also, don't forget to paint the small welcome letters on top, also in red. Again, try to work precise and only paint the letters themselves. After you're done with this step, your sign should look something like this. So it's time to go to Everland Sunset and paint the outer rim. On the front, you shouldn't have any issues to do that, but on the back, it's a bit more difficult. Try to paint a rim that is roughly the same thickness all over the whole sign. But if you're painting like I do, we have some, let's call it happy mistakes. So we go to Administratum Gray next and go over the yellow areas that shouldn't be yellow at all. As the rim on the bottom is really nice to paint, you'll have the most problems on top like I do. And as you don't want a big gray blob, you put lots of water on your brush and make downward strokes and try to, let's say, fade out the gray that you've just painted. If it becomes too dry, just add a bit more and with lots of water on your brush, try to work the color down. Then we go to Ceramide White and with also lots of water on your brush, go over the heavy gray parts, also downward strokes, so you don't have too much weathering on your first step. Next, back to the front, also Ceramide White, and as you might have made some mistakes coloring red or blue your letters. We now cover those spots before we use some lighter blue like Army Painter's Crystal Blue for the first highlight layer. We're talking about the middle line, Too Fabulous, and as I decide where my light is coming from left above in my case, I highlight those parts where the light would be shining on before adding some Baharoth blue and add some even stronger or brighter highlights. I like in this special case the comic style that you don't use often when painting Fallout miniatures where brown is more dominating. Now to Blood Red, and we do the same as we did to the middle line with the Las Vegas line. So decide where your light would be coming from and highlight first with the red tone. Don't forget the first line also, the welcome. And when you've finished highlighting with the blood red, we go to White Rider Red. And we do the same thing as before. The highlighted parts now get a stronger or brighter highlight with the orange tone on the Las Vegas letters and also on the welcome letters. Last, we highlight the rim using Flesh Gits Yellow. First, we highlight the same side as the letters and don't forget, turn around and also highlight now the back part. When you finish doing this, Don't forget at the broken parts to highlight also the inside of the rim. Now we go to Ceramic White to highlight the lightly gray parts. Of course, we begin at the top with the welcome sign letters and then also at the broken parts. Don't forget the rear side. Now contrast snakebite leather for our first part of the weathering. It's all about downward strokes when using this technique. Simply search for the part where you want to begin, put some brown under some edges, and then use your brush to move the color downwards. And it would be flowing around this S, for example. So we paint the brown around the S shape and then downwards where it would flow. The brown that we just painted on would be a bit too much, a bit too hard. So we add some water, and as the color is still wet, we use up and downward strokes, mainly downward strokes, to get a really old, dirty and grimy effect. Repeat that process until you're happy with the result. But we don't use only brown, so I go to Army Painter's Military Shader next. The same procedure, decide for one of the edges, put some Army Painter's green under there, and then downward, move the color downward with your brush, just as the grime and the dirt would flow. The number of spots where you want the green color to flow down is up to you. Do that on as many or as less spots as you like. You must be happy with the result. Go for it as long as you like it. Also, put some green over the already brown painted areas, and don't forget the upper part where the welcome is. If you think the color is too strong, just add some water with your brush and make up and downward strokes until the color is nearly gone, and apply some new just as before. Repeat all that until you're happy with the result. Then turn around and go for the rear part. Also here, add the green at the top and then move downward strokes to move the color down as the dirt and grime would move in real life. Also here, add as many or as less of the color as you like. It should look a bit grimy, but not completely green. Then we head back to the front part and add some finishing touches with the green before we use the brown ink on the yellow rim parts. Not only at the bottom, also at the top. Then we use the brown contrast color to do exactly the same as we did before with the Army Painter's green ink. When you're happy with the result on the front part, again turn it around, and at the back part also use the Citadel contrast color to make some brown strokes. Let it dry, and then we use some AK Interactive Streaking Dirt pen. The tip has to be wet. Apply it first at the back part because it's much easier to use here. Use your pen just like a brush, so from up to down, and you don't have to be as quick as with a normal acrylic color. Use a wet brush with up and downward movements. Add more of the pigments. Use your brush to move it up and down until you're happy with the result. And now, as you've practiced a bit, apply best with your brush directly the pigments on the front part. Now we're going to dry brush with Baylor Brown first the top part of our sign. So we want to create the illusion of dust that has settled down onto our sign. So we going to dry brush the top part and also a bit at the front and at the back. Baylor Brown is the first of two dry brushing layers. When you've applied the Baylor Brown, we go to Ushabti Bone and do the same again, not as much dry brushing as we did with the first color. Then we grab our Ashing Gray and do some dry brushing at the bottom part of our sign. Not too much here, please. Also dry brush a bit with the dark gray around the broken edges. Take really good care because you don't want to apply too much color here. It shouldn't be really thick gray The big brush that I use normally for dry brushing may be a bit too big here, so you can go for a smaller brush and do the last dry brushing accents here. Now we're done with the sign itself, and as the next part we have the legs. I've printed the legs with my eco resin from Anycubic, so it is a bit wobbly. The Evergreen 285H column will give it a bit more stability, so I use my super glue and glue one of those stripes at each of the legs at the rear, first on one side and after that on the other leg. Use your cutter to bring it to the correct size. Now onto the base. I use 1mm thick styrene sheet, it's 5 cm wide and 9 cm long. Just cut it to the correct size, break it apart and clean the edges with your knife. Then apply some plastic glue onto the plastic parts on your legs and some super glue on the resin part of your legs. Place it left from the middle and centered on your base. Check before it's completely dry if it's really standing correct. I corrected this, as you can see here, and give it a last check before spray painting it with Corax White. Before base coating it all with Army Painter's Crystal Blue. Use an old big brush for it, you don't have to use a good one here. Then ink it all with Army Painter's Blue Tone. Just apply it into the recesses and go for it. Cover everything and then we dry brush it with Baharoth Light Blue and the old big brush. You have to dry brush the whole big thing. The front, the back, left, right, top, bottom, everything. As you can see on the sides, the layers are still visible, but in the end, I like it kind of, so I didn't do anything against it. And then we go to Ashing Gray and dry brush just a little bit at the bottom part. Also here around both of the legs. In the end, it should look something like this. Now it's time for the star and we begin with corn red. Just cover the whole star in corn red. The front and also in the back. After the first layer of red is dried, we go over one step higher and take our blood red next. Also on this step, remember where the light should be coming from. Paint the edge themselves and that part of the star where the light would be shining on. Try to thin your red down a bit with water so it isn't too thick at this step. After the front part is ready, go to the back part of your star and also here remember where the light should be coming from. And after that, another layer of white Rider Red at the edges themselves to make them even brighter, and also where the light should be shining on, a bit more White Rider Red. Add it here and there. And also on the step, don't forget the back. A bit edge highlighting with the White Rider Red, and you can smoothen it down with water if you want to. Should look something like this, and the star is finished. Now back to the snakebite leather to do some weathering. It looks best in the recesses on the front part, so we start here. Apply it at the top part and with some water on your brush, move the color downwards so it looks like some rain or whatever would have washed some dirt and grime down here. Don't forget the sides and of course the rear part. Also apply some of the contrast paint on your star so it doesn't look too new and shiny. After you're finished with this step, put it aside and let it go dry before we go to Military Shader from Army Painter. Paint some grime effects just like you did before with the brown. Then we go to Baylor Brown and dry brush at the top some dust effects just like we did with the sign itself. And when you're done with dry brushing Baylor Brown, we go to our Ushabti bone and do a second layer of dry brushing at the top, just not as much as we did with the Baylor Brown. You should remember this step, it's the same as we did with the sign itself. As I have Ushabti bone on my brush at the moment, I'm painting the base right now. If you want to use another color, use this one. Then I use my wood glue to glue some stones on the base. They're also good because it will give the base more stability through their weight. And for the new Vegas flare, I'm also gluing down a cactus that I painted just like I did in my Cactus terrain video, which you can find on my channel. And now I'm adding some snakebite onto the stones as the first layer. While the snakebite leather is drying, I decided to go for another small cactus and glued it down at this corner right here. After the stones are dry, I'm dry brushing them with Ushabti bone. Just dry brush all over all three stones. And when this is done, I add to this Ushabti bone some ceramide white and dry brush with this mixture all three of the stones. A classic Fallout thing is adding a skeleton, so I printed one and added a green stuff cowboy hat, so it gives another new Vegas flair. Looks something like this. I'm pretty happy with the hat. So I went, painted it, and also as I was painting it, I added this blue bandana. Now onto the basing. I'm using sand just like I did with all my other terrain videos. You can watch them if you're interested. One thing, the NUV for New Vegas is still missing. Macragge blue is the first color I'm using to paint the N letter. Just to make sure, paint it on all sides so that none of the gray or whatever color you were using printing it is visible. Then we go to the E letter and paint it Flesh Gets Yellow. Also here, paint the whole letter, both sides. No gray or whatever color you were using should be seen anymore. Maybe because it's yellow, you need another layer. And then the W corn red before we return to the E letter and Everland Sunset to accent the edges. This letter is a bit special because the outer parts are darker than the inner parts, but that should be so. Then we go for crystal blue and highlight the N letter. The light is still coming from the same side, so we highlight from left up to bottom right. Now we're doing the same thing with blood red and the W. Light is still coming from left upper side, and for even more highlights we again use Wild Rider red, but just some edge highlighting. The last letter that needs some highlighting, we go to the E and a mixture of yellow and white. Now that this is done, I want to represent the light bulbs that are normally there with some dots of Rune Fang steel. Now you need a steady hand, but I'm sure you can do it. I decided that my red is too bright, so I went for the snakebite leather and gave the W another coat of this brownish ink. After drying, I reapplied the silver for my light bulbs. Now we need to glue those letters down using some super glue. Please be sure to make a dry fitting before really gluing them down, just to make sure that you don't ruin your terrain piece now in the last step. I finished the base using sand and green tufts just like in the other videos, so there is now only one thing left to do, and that is adding the sign itself using super glue onto those two legs. So take a look where the sign will have contact, put some super glue onto there, check again where the sign will be on the other leg, apply some super glue there, and last, add some super glue on the bottom part at the back of the sign itself. Then press it on. Congratulations, your personal sign is now finished. I hope you like your result. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. I hope you had fun. Thanks all very much. I appreciate every one of you watching my videos. See you next time.